Hi, Omkar.
Hi, Mr. Mangan. Welcome. Hello.
I'm fine, thank you. How are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for giving your valuable time for this talk.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. So, good morning to you. It's quite early for you, correct?
It is, but I'm an early riser, so it's fine. It's no big deal.
That's that's amazing. That's amazing.
I've already been up for a while.
Yeah. Oh, super. Actually, I've been following you since quite some time now, and it's been more than a year. And interestingly, one of my nutrition clients, actually introduced me to you. So, me being a nutritionist, I actually used to love reading blogs or watching videos of people who have a similar philosophy when it comes to, or the right philosophy when it comes to nutrition. And back in 2013, I completed my nutrition course, which taught us some different concepts, which on the calorie concepts or the carbohydrate concepts. And I was a strong believer in that. But in 2015, when I started digging up more, and actually when I read this book called as Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes, that's when it struck me that, oh my God, whatever I've been doing for the last 2 years is actually wrong, and this is the right kind of nutrition. So I would really love to know your story and your journey in this whole, or this your journey up till now.
Okay, so yes, uh, Gary Taub's book, "Good Calories, Bad Calories," is a very good one, and it when I read that, that had a lot to do with changing my thinking about all of this, right? So that was well, I suppose I read it shortly after it came out. Um, I think it's especially influenced me about the idea that that saturated fat or cholesterol were responsible for heart disease. Of course, like most people, I believed that up until about then, and he presented some very good evidence that is not the case, and that was pretty mind blowing to me. I really was forced to change my mind, and so anyway, I mean, my whole journey through all this has a lot to do with my own personal health. So I was a vegan for many years, and
Wow.
I suffered from ill health. But at the same time, I was convinced that this was the healthiest thing to do, the healthiest way to eat,
Okay.
because that's what everybody said. I mean, it really follows logically that if saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease, then and heart disease runs in my family,
Okay.
so I've always been concerned about it.
Yeah.
Um, then it makes sense that eating no animal products is the healthiest way to go. So when I was trying to figure out, um, doctors couldn't figure out my health problems, and when I was trying to figure them out myself, um, I started researching and reading, and I came across a few things that indicated that to me that being a vegan
Mm.
was not the way to go, not necessarily the healthiest thing to do, and that was kind of a shocker to me.
Yeah.
Really, that's some people who had seriously thought about this and looked into it thought that this was not the way to go, and I thought, wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, one thing led to another. I kept doing my reading and researching. As far as myself goes, I it was not long before I came to the conclusion that being a vegan was risky for my health,
Yeah.
and that it might be connected to my problems. So I stopped being a vegan, and I got better. I did some other things, but I started feeling better, and I started exercising as much as I was able to do, and I got a lot better. So that, if you want to fast forward to today, I guess one thing that at the time when I was ill and I was trying to figure out what was wrong, I thought to myself that if I ever got better, if I ever got healthy, that I would have to write about this, about chronic fatigue, which is what I had, and how to fix it. And so I did get better. And so I wrote about it.
Wow.
And then I wrote a short book, put it up on Amazon and Kindle. And then when I was done, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Well, I guess I'll keep writing. So a few years later, here I am.
Wow, amazing. And I'm a big fan of your writing for a very simple reason, because the way you write, even your newsletter, it is extremely direct. It is extremely pointed. So, the statements are pretty bold for many people, but they're very, very direct. And because it is all research based and evidence based, then believing that actually becomes much more easier. So as a end consumer of your content, it is absolutely amazing that all that content actually comes in a way of a shot every day. And I've been reading your blog since a year now, and I make sure that I don't miss any of them. And many of my clients, when they face any kind of difficulties in understanding a few concepts, especially on saturated fats, especially on oils, then I do forward your emails to them, and even they have been big fans. Coming to the point of your age, I mean, you look amazing at the age of 64. I've seen the latest post, the latest picture which you posted on Instagram with a front double bicep pose in a ganji, and that looks amazing. And interestingly, what happened is that one of my clients, she's 64. She's also 64. And she had trouble lifting a can of water. And her name is Lorraine. And she had trouble lifting that. And then she came into strength training. She started strength training. And about 1.5 years later, which is now, she competed in the national powerlifting competition in India, and she won a gold medal in that. And
That's
everyone
amazing.
yeah, and everyone is amazed at her strength, because she has got two sweet granddaughters, and she's been lifting one granddaughter in one arm and running around her farm. And that has been a big shift. And even for you, actually going from vegan to completely on the correct nutrition, which is mostly meat, would be a big change, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was a big change. And I suppose now, yeah, I'm completely used to it. But yeah, sure, it was a big change, a change in a way of thinking, as well as a way of eating. Yes.
Absolutely. Coming to the point, which is Indians. So we Indians in India, almost 60 to 70% people are actually vegetarians. Not really vegans, but vegetarians at a large proportion. And India is topping the charts now when it comes to diabetes, when it comes to diabesity or obesity. PCOS is again a big, I mean, it's growing like crazy. And again, people are going to the drugs or the medicines to get cured with these things, but they are not solving the root cause, is what I believe.
Yes, it's true. Um, it's becoming increasingly apparent that not that abstaining, or at least restricting carbohydrates, is the thing that diabetics should do, and instead they get drugs for the most part. And I think that there are a few reasons for that. One is that some people, maybe many people who have diabetes or metabolic syndrome or along those lines, don't want to change. They won't change their diet and so on. Another thing is that most doctors are not really trained in nutrition. They don't, and they don't, you know, in their defense, they don't see it as their bailiwick. You know, they are there to practice medicine. And that involves giving drugs, you know, or surgery, what have you. So, and then, you know, yet another reason is that, you know, low carbohydrate diets are still just not really accepted by the mainstream. There's a lot of agitation against them. You know, even I read these. So I believe it was the main American Diabetes Association that just came out and said, just like last week or something, that low carbohydrate diets are effective for diabetes, and that they may have even said something to the effect of that's the best way to go as far as eating. And that is a real sea change in this.
Wow, that is a great news, actually. that's...
Yes, but I read these statements. I've read these statements in the past from the American associations, and I still see these things. One person I follow on Twitter posts these ones from the Australian Diabetes Federation, and it's appalling what they're saying. And you read what these dietitians advocate that diabetics eat, and it's like 50% carbohydrates.
Absolutely.
Maybe, hopefully that's changing, but yeah, it's a big problem. Let me add something else in here too, that I think probably the average person doesn't realize, is that diabetes is merely an end result of a long chain of events, of a long history. Typically, people travel 20 years to get to diabetes, something like that, you know, typically.
Absolutely.
And in the modern world, in the Western world, and including, I think, a great many people in India, many people are traveling along that road. They have not all arrived yet. And, you know, many will not arrive during the course of their lives, but they are in ill health because they are traveling along that road. They have metabolic syndrome, they have, you know, glucose intolerance, and so on and so forth. So I think that possibly people, when we talk about diabetics, that's important, of course, but probably many people hearing that think, well, I'm not diabetic, so that doesn't apply to me.
Right.
And that is not true. It applies to so many people. In the modern United States, the vast majority of people it applies to, that they are somewhere along this road of metabolic dysfunction, metabolic syndrome, and eventually diabetes.
Absolutely. I actually, when I talk to a pre-diabetic, I actually tell him that till today you were wearing a bulletproof vest and someone was shooting you bullets. The bullets were made up of sugar. And till today your bulletproof vest wasn't wearing out. But now it has started wearing out. Now you have started facing the your tolerance of tolerating glucose is going down, and now your body is going to start taking a hit. But what's more important to understand is that even before this wearing out starts happening, even a person who is completely healthy, according to the lab reports, if a person is physiologically healthy, that still does not imply or mean that carbohydrates are healthy. As you mentioned, they are down the road. They are just not arrived at. Absolutely. And there was one more point actually, that Indians currently, as India is growing in the charts of obesity and diabetes on a very steep rate, Indians are actually blaming the whole westernization that is happening. I mean, the McDonald's and Burger King joints which are opening up all over. But if you again see, most Indians are not eating McDonald's and pizzas and burgers. They are actually eating typical Indian food. And my hunch is on that, that even the typical Indian food that you're eating, the wheat that India eats mostly, or the rice and the potatoes that Indians eat mostly, is also genetically modified, is also processed. And in the end, it's also glucose for the body. So all carbohydrates will damage the body the same. Be it Western carbohydrates or Eastern, it doesn't really matter.
Right, right, absolutely. And in the United States, you see similar, pointing the blame at things like fast food and McDonald's and so on. And certainly most of the stuff there is not healthy. I agree with that. But yeah, all the carbohydrates. There seems to be so if we go back, like say in India, to I don't know, let's say 60 years ago, 80 years ago, or something like that. So presumably people ate a fairly high carbohydrate diet, maybe perhaps even more so than now, because India there's less poverty now than back then and so on. So people can afford to eat somewhat better. But we probably didn't see quite so many health problems as a result of eating all the carbohydrates. So this is I'm playing devil's advocate here, because people say this to me. They say, well, look at Japan 100 years ago. Everybody was eating all this rice, and and they were thin and so on and so forth. So there seem to be additional elements. Of course, 60, 80 years ago in India or in Japan or wherever we want to look, we don't really know that, oh, they were eating all these carbohydrates and they were healthy. I would not say that's the case.
Yeah.
Yet there seems something now that is in addition, for example, because we see all the obesity now, which we did not see back then.
Right.
So what is it? Those are all good questions. Sugar, I think, is one. There's a lot more use of sugar, because sugar has become much cheaper, and so people are using it. And also, there are some very readily available forms of sugar, such as soft drinks, that people are consuming a lot of. What else? Vegetable oils is another candidate for for causing health problems when added to all the carbohydrates. So there's a lot going on there, I think, that have turned carbohydrates worse, I guess you could say. Right. I think in the United States, if we go back, I don't know how long. Let's just call it 120 years. Mm-hmm. Of course, people were eating carbohydrates, bread, in this country, for example, but they don't seem to have been eating such massive amounts of it as we are today. Yeah. They also did not have so many artificial products, such as the vegetable oils.
Or maybe high fructose corn syrup in the fruit.
Right, sure, exactly. And yes, so high fructose corn syrup and sugar was used a lot less. If you look at figures for sugar consumption, it's pretty massive today in the United States, well over 100 pounds, and they weren't consuming as much sugar. So there's a lot of these trends going on with people consuming these basically what I think of as artificial foods, ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
Things like white flour, massive amounts of sugar, and vegetable oils didn't really exist before about 150 years ago. So all those, as far as I can see, these are all contributing factors.
Absolutely. And there's one interesting point which you made about the unsaturated fats or the oils which people are using nowadays. In India, we were huge consumers of ghee about 60 to 100 years ago. I mean, ghee was used in food, ghee was used to cook vegetables and meat and everything that Indians cooked. But now, due to this huge, again, a very, very highly funded marketing campaign by certain oil companies, sunflower oil and safflower oil or soybean oil has actually become the staple in every Indian household. Be it, economically, be it below the poverty line, be it at the poverty line, or be it at the high end too. Uh, no, I mean, oils with no cholesterol or plant-based oils have become the staple foods. And actually, if you see the cases of hypertension have been going up like crazy. I mean, heart attacks and hypertension have been going up like crazy even after not eating cholesterol. So what's your take on this whole fat phobia that people have, that, hey, no ghee or no butter or no cheese?
Well, I guess my whole take could be summed up in a word. I think it's terrible. The traditional forms of fats that Indians used, mainly ghee, as you say, this is a healthy way to cook. And in the United States and in the Western world, we haven't used. So ghee is clarified butter. That's I think in French cooking they use it a fair amount, but
Yeah.
mostly not in the Western world. But we have used butter and various animal fats
Yeah.
to cook with. So what ghee and these other fats have going for them that's healthy is that they're mainly saturated fat. Saturated fat is a very stable fat that does not oxidize, readily. So it can be cooked. It does not oxidize in your body when you eat it. It is all healthy. So these vegetable oils, or as I usually refer to them, seed oils, because people think they're made from vegetables. They're not made from vegetables. They're made from seeds.
Yeah.
And so these seed oils have, they're mainly polyunsaturated fat, omega-6 polyunsaturated fat. So for example, something like corn oil is around 70% or more polyunsaturated fat. And this kind of oil is very easily oxidized.
Correct.
And causes, so these oxidation products are very toxic. For example, there's one that is called HNE that is a product of oxidation of linoleic acid. Linoleic acid being the main omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid in seed oils. And HNE is quite toxic. It reacts with molecules, protein molecules, and other structural molecules inside the body, and damages them.
Correct.
So HNE is a leading candidate for a role in atherosclerosis, because it interacts with proteins and in the blood vessel walls, damaging them. And then this in turn causes an inflammatory response, leading to the evolution of plaque in the arteries. These seed oils, the resulting inflammation and oxidation results in oxidized LDL particles, which seem to be important in atherosclerosis. So yes, all this. Obviously, most people have little understanding of the chemistry going on here, and that's understandable. Most people don't have an understanding of chemistry or interest in it, so they don't see why these seed oils are not good. Let me just add another thing. Another reason for the unhealthiness of these seed oils is not only because they can cause this molecular damage when they're oxidized, but also they are mainly composed of omega-6 fatty acids.
Correct.
So there are two basic kinds of polyunsaturated fats, the omega-6 fatty acids and the omega-3 fatty acids. So
Yeah.
the omega-3s are the kind that we associate with fish mainly, and we have a really radical unbalance in these omega-6 versus omega-3 fatty acids. We should be getting them about equally, but because of this wide use of seed oils, we get much more omega-6.
Absolutely.
And that leads to many inflammatory diseases. These omega-6 fats are used in the production of various inflammatory chemicals in the body, inflammatory cytokines and prostaglandins and eicosanoids, and that signal inflammation. So they lead to a generalized state of inflammation in the body. So basically, yeah, vegetable oils are bad news.
Bad news. Yeah, absolutely. And with the, as you mentioned, LDL actually being oxidized. So unfortunately, even the medical fraternity actually blames the LDL cholesterol for being, or term it as a bad cholesterol, where the actual blame should be put on the elements which glycate or oxidize the LDL, which is sugars or the inflammatory particles, as you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. It appears to be that it's oxidized LDL that is the problem. You mentioned another good point there about glycation. So what that is sugar molecules being non-enzymatically attached to protein molecules.
Yeah.
And so high blood sugar can do this. So whether somebody has high blood sugar due to a metabolic problem or fructose from sugar is very prone to cause this problem. It's much more reactive even than glucose. So yes, that is another thing. High blood sugars and ingestion of sugars can damage molecules in this way. Also bad news.
Absolutely. And there's one more philosophy actually which you have, which I like very much, and even we use it, the same philosophy in our company, which is that there is one solution. There are no weekly changing diets, and then there are no diets based on calorific calculations. There is just one solution that people need to understand. The problem with that sometimes is that when we give people a very, very simple plan, or a plan which has just got one solution for multiple problems, they start thinking that, oh, is this correct? I mean, should this be more and more complicated? And then they fail to understand that a nutritionist or the health coach should actually simplify things for the client and not complicate it. So I love that approach that you have, which is that there is one solution. Even when it comes to strength training, you've got one plan, and the 1 hour fitness program, which is again amazing.
Well, thank you. Yes, as far as strength training goes, yes, I believe there's basically one solution that that everybody should do. So it's interesting. I've had friends of mine that I work with who have urged me to come out with other plans, other training programs, and so on.
Yeah.
Other than I have two now, one based on the gym and one based on at home.
At home.
But that's the only difference, because I believe that the same strength training program should apply to everyone, whether it's men, women, young,
Absolutely.
old. Obviously, there are going to be a few differences in detail. Someone who is old and infirm, for example, is going to have greater difficulty. They need more guidance, that maybe personal coaching when they do it, and so on. But as far as the method of strength training, how the exercises are done and which exercises they should do, I believe this is a blanket recommendation for everyone. So there's a lot of especially in strength training and resistance training, there is just a great deal of variety and confusion
Yeah.
out there
Yeah.
as to what people should do, and they so yes, people are confused. They don't know how they should do it. And let me make another point about this. So one common thing you see with regard to strength training, with regard to claims about strength training, someone will say, for example, I put on 30 pounds of muscle and lost 20 pounds of fat by doing this particular strength training program. So, okay, that's great. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't have done it more effectively in some other way.
Absolutely.
Because
Exactly.
you don't know that.
Yeah.
If it took them 5 years to put on those 30 pounds of muscle, you don't know that maybe they could have done it in 2 years.
Exactly.
If they had trained in a different way.
I mean, being optimized. Yeah.
Right. And so there's another aspect of that too, that if this particular training program worked for this person, it doesn't mean that it will work for everyone. But I would emphasize the first more. What I'm interested in is the most effective way to train. Absolutely. And the effective way to train, in my view, is to do relatively brief, relatively infrequent, but very intense training.
Absolutely. That's so correct. Actually, it's, the philosophy matches exactly, because what I believe in when it comes to strength training mainly is that even if the exercises remain the same, or if the program remains the same, and if you keep repeating the exercises again and again, you're actually getting neurally more adapted to those exercises. And it is the skill and the rate coding of the neurons which actually starts improving. And that in turn aids hypertrophy of the muscle. That's again, I am feeling so excited and so happy about a person being so aligned with the thoughts of efficiency, of being optimal when it comes to the human body, and having, or maybe even when I see your tweets, they're more simplifying than complicating. I mean, if you look at one meta-analysis or one research, you exactly take the gist out of that research and then you post it in a tweet. So just reading that tweet gives the whole perspective of what the whole research is about. So hats off to you for that.
Well, thank you. I've had to learn a little bit about how to do that, because over the years doing that, and I've realized that I would tweet something or write something in an email or whatever the medium was, and a lot of people didn't understand what I was saying, what point I was trying to make. So I've tried to learn from that and to clarify that. Interestingly enough, a couple of years ago, I learned a little bit about copywriting. So copywriting is writing for sales and advertising, because people were telling me, you need to learn this and so on. I thought, oh, I don't want to learn about copywriting. It sounds all boring.
Yeah.
But I read a couple of books about it and learned the basics of copywriting. And when I started incorporating that, a lot of people immediately told me, "Oh, you're so clear now. It's much more understandable, and you can make it understandable to people and much more clear."
Oh wow!
A hazard of people who there's an interesting concept in writing called the problem of knowledge, I think is what they call it. Now I'm a little hazy just at the moment. The idea is that for somebody who's writing or for somebody who's teaching, it's very difficult to understand that people don't know what
Yeah.
you know.
Correct.
And to get this across. So, a teacher who gets in front of a classroom who knows mathematics thoroughly and has been teaching it all his life, he doesn't really get. It's hard to get into the minds of the students who don't understand. And so I think that that problem. The writer's curse, that is the expression I was looking for.
Curse.
That's what this is sometimes known as.
Okay.
So it really helps to understand that, to understand that people haven't they haven't had the same education and training in this subject matter that I have had. They're certainly like I read a lot on Twitter. I read a lot of investors, and they have a lot more training and knowledge in that field than I do. And when they can make it clear, that's really good. Sometimes they don't, though, when you get into some very abstract concepts and so on. So anyway, it's just that, yes, I try to make it clear. I have learned something over the years about trying to make it clear. So I hope I'm successful in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we as an end consumer, as in I tried it out with some of my clients as well, where I started forwarding your links or your tweets to, or I started tagging them in your tweets, and they also got the point across. And actually, one more thing I wanted to mention is that there was one tweet of yours about a year ago. I have saved it as a bookmark. A bookmark. In that tweet, you had mentioned the term health span, just like lifespan. You had mentioned the term health span, and Health Span Bio is the name of the company that we have now, and we have been consulting people for exercise and nutrition now. So I'm actually, I mean, I don't know if you'll be able to see, I'm wearing the T-shirt of our company, Health Span Bio. Yeah. So
yes,
yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept that most people don't think about. That it comes up in aging research, which I'm very interested in because I'm aging, and so I'm interested in fighting it. But yeah, so most people have chronic diseases in their lifespan, and that's really not supposed to happen. The idea is to be not only long lifespan but long health span.
Yeah, fantastic. Just one last point that I wanted to say is that what would be your message to all the Indians, especially all the Indians out there? A message from you.
Well, I think that in terms of health, that diet is just extremely important. There in India, there's increasing rates of diabetes and metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease as well. And in my humble opinion, this mostly comes from diet. So the message I think that I would give to Indians is to eat real food. This is the most basic message. It gets around this, like I mentioned earlier, that people will say, well, 100 years ago, we were eating carbohydrates too. But the food now is not necessarily real in the sense that it's what our ancestors ate. So we have these seed oils. There's lots of sugar. There's lots of white flour and so on. So that would, in terms of health, I think that's probably the most important thing, is to eat real food.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Mr. Mangan, for being on this session. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Omkar. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.